Hello and welcome to this final edition of Empathy at the Table for 2023. I'm wishing you a Merry Christmas. This is, as you can see, I'm in Christmas attire and I'll be joined by some fantastic guests, three guests who will also be in Christmas attire. Paul Jeremeas, Zsuzsanna Ferenczi and Kevin Woodson. These three individuals I met over the last 3 to 5 years. And we decided to come together and write a book. Now, none of us are authors, none of us had ever written books before, but we decided to join our common knowledge and experiences in the corporate world together. And the problem we were trying to solve or trying to investigate was, why was it that so many people seem disengaged in the workplace? People don't wake up in the morning and go into the office expecting to have a bad day, but yet there were so many stories we would hear of people coming home having had a bad day and having not really contributed in the workplace. And we wanted to investigate why this was. And we looked at this phenomenon, we did a thorough research, and we decided to put our ideas together and create a book which would help people find their flow. In fact, the title of the book is called Enter Your Flow. And it was written by John Zimmer, who won't be on the podcast, incidentally, Kevin Woodson, Zsuzsanna Ferenczi, Paul Jeremeas, and myself. And I am very, very happy to introduce our fantastic guest. It's going to be fun. Enjoy this session of Empathy at the Table. Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Empathy at the Table. Today, I'm joined by some fantastic guests, and there is a story behind the reason these wonderful people are on our podcast today. One person you may recognize already, Zsuzsanna Ferenczi. We have had the pleasure to have a chat on one of our previous episodes. But let's jump straight in and introduce our phenomenal guest to you. And we'll start with Kevin. Kevin, would you like to just share a little bit about who you are, and we'll unwind and unravel why you're on our podcast today?
Happy to do it. I joined the team as the artist. Sometimes I say I'm like the fifth Beatle. I came in to this book project and this team knowing what we were doing, and I fully embraced it because I know the work of the people on the team. I know the work of Paul, of Zsuzsanna, and I learned, met Tony and John, and naturally found a spot for my art, which is the book.
Thank you, Kevin. And Paul.
Yeah, so great, Tony. Thanks. Well, I think this all came together quite magically, really. I think we've all worked in various contexts, business contexts. I've worked with Zsuzsanna over many years and Kevin many years, but then suddenly there was a catalyst that we came together. We knew we had to work together on something concrete, and that's why we started working on this. So about 3 years ago, and it's been a fantastic journey. I think we all built on our respective experiences, and something kind of beautiful has come out of it. So it's been fantastic.
Thank you there, Paul. And Zsuzsanna, again, welcome.
Thank you, Tony. So I joined the team, or I would say that I godmothered this team a little bit because I knew Tony, I knew Paul, I knew Kevin, and then Tony, you knew John. So my part in this is my passion that relates to how we can empower people to really find their relationship to work as a deeper, more meaningful relationship. And I found really a tribe for this purpose in the rest of you. And I'm really glad that I'm with you today on this very special podcast.
Yeah, the Christmas edition. I love the Northern Lights in the back. For those of you who are listening on Spotify or on Apple podcast, you won't be able to see, but Kevin and Zsuzsanna have wonderful Northern Lights shimmering in the background, and Paul has this absolutely amazing Elton John-like Christmas jacket and these incredible Christmas glasses on. Paul, let's kick off. Why now for the book? Why do you think now is a good time to write a book like this?
Well, a number of reasons, Tony. I think over my career, I've always had fantastic experiences in terms of enjoying what I've been doing, different career in research and development, innovation, etc. But I was increasingly coming across people in their working lives that weren't enjoying themselves. And this for me was so sad. You know, why? Because we spend a lot of time at work working, and I think it's so important to enjoy and have fulfillment from what you're doing. And I think particularly during the COVID times as well, people are reflecting a little bit on what they're doing, why they're doing it, and this kind of brought it to the surface much more strongly for many people. But there's just one trigger amongst many. There's been over the years been many similar incidents which have caused people to reflect. And I think now's the time in terms of people's mental fitness, their engagement with their work, thinking about their life. It's so important. And the whole concept of flow and engagement with what you're doing is so important. So my kind of mission is to kind of democratize innovation in organizations and get people to enjoy what they're doing and just get fulfillment. And if they're not, to make the changes to make it happen. So that's why I think the timing's very, very, very prevalent.
Democratize innovation, creativity, and innovation. I mean, how they sound like great words, but in how do you recognize that this is happening?
Well, I think, I mean, I've been running innovation centers for many years. I think a lot of people, when you mention the word innovation, say, that's not for me. I'm not innovative. I'm not creative. And so when I talk about democratizing innovation, it's helping people realize everybody has a contribution to make in any organization. And no matter what your role, you can look at what you're doing and say, how can I improve? Why don't you do things differently? And then think about getting the pleasure from making change. And so the idea is to empower people. And that helps also with resilience, because when things change in an organization, sometimes that can be quite threatening and people, oh my God, the world's changing. But it's not, it's an opportunity. And this is where I think everybody has to tap into their own creativity and empower themselves. And then the whole working environment flourishes from that. And so, yeah, they are fancy words. I used to talk about technology-enabled business innovation. People say, what the hell is that? But innovation is so important, and we all have it. You just have to find the right triggers to tease it out and then understand what it means for you to be in your flow zone and to get pleasure and satisfaction from what you're doing, no matter what you're doing. You should always be in that space. That's the best place to be.
Zsuzsanna, I see you nodding your head there. When you were writing the book and when you were coming together, who was the ideal persona or the ideal personas? Who did you have in mind would actually pick up this book, read it, and gain benefit from it?
Thank you, Tony, for this question, because I've been thinking a lot about this. And then some people, I was in Brussels this week, and people asked for a couple of books to take it to women 50 plus and who are really dissatisfied with work, and then they telling themselves that okay, I mean, what have I done in the last 20, 25 years in my career? I really want a different relationship with work. So I may have thought about this and then said, yes, this is a really cool target market for the book. And at the same time, I'm actually mentoring my niece who is 15 years old. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this book probably should be in the hands of the young generation in a way that's understandable for them, but starting their sort of young adult life without understanding their relationship to themselves, their values, and how they connect with others. I mean, young people are in projects already. I mean, she had a project this week and then she was panicking and she didn't know, am I good enough? I mean, can I do this project really? So I had to help her to get through this. And I said to myself, I really want this book in the hands of the young generation, actually, who will have a much better chance to have their long careers ahead of them, maybe starting in a more meaningful way. So, I mean, this book to me is, of course, amazingly valuable for people who want to redefine the work and then for what's left for them in their professional career, or how they relate to impact, how they relate to meaning. But gosh, I think it would be amazing for the young generation who are about to start in an extremely complex world. And then if we don't give them that inner strength then I think they're going to find it much more difficult than we found it 30 years ago to find our voice and then make aligned decisions to who we are.
What a superb insight. So your 15-year-old niece would pick up a book like this, and maybe 15 years into the future would look back and think, wow, that was a real inflection point in my life.
Yes, because they lost. I think they are a lot of them. I mean, they entering in a very, very complex world, and there is a lot of uncertainty. So if you don't build your inner strength, then I think you're going to be much more vulnerable to everything that's happening around you. And I take it as a personal responsibility for her, but I think it would be amazing if this could be more accessible to the younger generation.
Well, I think that's a great bridge to my next question. When we talk about the younger generation, I think the youngster in our group is Kevin. Kevin, you're self-confessed Peter Pan, and you just have an amazing ability to connect with your young self, and bring yourself authentically to the work that you do. I'd like you just to, if you can, explain how you do that. How you sit in the meetings that we've had over the last 3 years, and you sit most of the time, you're quiet, and you're sketching away, and then at the end of the conversation, you come up with a visual representation of what you've picked up, and I'd like to understand that process, that what happens in your brain as you're taking these words, you're then translating them into pictures, and then you present them to the real world.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks. And I feel like I'm in the sandbox with like-minded Peter Pans here with this book. I think we've all probably joined hands and taken flight, so to speak, and I found something entirely new. For me, before we started this book, I had gone through a long period of struggle, where I had been working in corporate America as an artist and being very successful and really loving it too. Just working on some great projects, like innovations and new business directions. I got to see a lot of things first, like even the beginnings of cloud computing. So it was very successful, and that's where I met Paul and Zsuzsanna in the innovation sphere, of some of the innovation centers in Europe. But no matter how successful it was always something that I'd come home from a week of work, and on the weekend or at night, I'd want to go out and do my own painting. And I also had a really successful career in galleries. But it was kind of like you always have to keep those two paths apart, because you can never let the corporate people know that you're an artist, even if you are an artist. And collectors, they don't want someone who's, maybe got a day job and just sort of painting some pictures at night. So this book was an opportunity for me to take off both of the masks and demand people accept me for who I am, and realize that I can come and show up and be a stronger business artist and a strategist if I can tap into my deeper creativity, and that bringing the kind of innovation that and the thinking that we did, like in the early days, thinking of what cloud might be like, or thinking about G5, for example, gets me thinking about new ways to present new stories, new techniques, new media to use in art. And when I'm listening in a group and developing my artistic ideas, I think that's about listening to both voices in my team, because everyone can talk strategy in business and do a presentation and present PowerPoint, but like Paul, I think that everyone has an underlying creative inner voice that's sometimes being voiced loudly and sometimes maybe very subtly. And for me, listening to that and bringing that to the surface is the magic.
Yeah, certainly there were some moments of magic over the last 3 years, and there's still many more moments to come. I have another question. This is for Paul, and in you worked for 30 years in the tech space, but you were the innovative kind of head in the tech space, and I'm trying to kind of join the dots between tech, innovation, and psychological safety, right? If you feel safe, then you feel safe to make mistakes. So therefore you can be innovative. But if you're working in a company and you're not allowed to make mistakes, or you don't have that level of psychological safety, then how can you be innovative? How did you observe and navigate that tension?
Very good point, Tony. And it's interesting because I think, as you said, I worked many years in one big, large organization as an entrepreneur, as they call it. I think, in a way, the only reason I was able to succeed in doing the things I did is because I was confident in the value that I had, that I was bringing. I was confident that I was delivering value, and there was a need for the value that I was delivering. So, to be honest, I was very difficult to manage. And many of my ex-managers would agree with that. I saw many CEOs in the company come and leave. And I think really everyone has to be confident in their own ability, because then it doesn't really matter what happens around you. You know you can apply that ability elsewhere. So you have to have a clear vision, of course, of what you're trying to achieve. But at any point in time, just understand, be convinced and understand that what you're doing is for the right reasons. And you're not worried about any extrinsic accolades or people saying, oh, you're doing the right thing. You know intuitively you're doing the right thing. And so in a way, that's one of the things you have to try to get across to other people and tapping into their creativity, and then say, this is fantastic. Do something with your idea. Don't just have a great idea and do nothing with it, because you're going to get so much more satisfaction from taking it forward. And so you have to be a little bit bombastic, as they say, and take it forward. And providing you know what you're doing is for the right reasons, then you don't have any problems. In terms of the psychological safety, there is no real safety. I mean, because things can always turn bad. But again, if you're on the right track and you're sending out kind of positive energy, things will come together. That's the main thing.
Can you give us an example of let's say, something that you did where you intrinsically felt this was right, but maybe extrinsically you were receiving signals and signs that maybe it wasn't, but you pushed through anyway? What were the consequences?
Yeah, but one of the things was one of the centers I set up was in the Middle East, in Dubai. And at the time, there was a lot of naysayers saying, well, why do we need this? No one's going to want to go to Dubai to go to these centers. But I'd already had the experience of people who were very willing to come to Geneva, which is where I live. And so I knew it was the right thing to do because the demand was there. So you had to find obviously a sponsor to make it work, but most people in my organization were saying, no, this is the wrong thing to do. From the marketing organization, from the sales organization. And so they're very much against it. But you have to put, I mean, one of the groups I left once, and I was moving on to do another job like that. And my previous manager, as a leaving gift, he gave me a bag of marbles. He thought I'd lost my marbles. It's an English expression. And so this is kind of, but I knew I was doing the right thing. So you just have to go with it. And then things will naturally happen in the right way, providing you're in that flow zone. As I now, I've kind of learned the vocabulary I need to use to explain what I experience myself. Once you're in that zone, things will naturally work out for you. You should never worry about the safety aspect, providing you're convinced you're doing the right thing.
So, Zsuzsanna, you've managed hundreds of people in your time in the corporate world. How do you manage somebody like Paul, who's an outlier and who just lives in his flow? What do you do?
I hug him. I embrace him. And I would say, go, Paul.
But I mean, we joke about it. if we are all outliers in our own way, because that's what brought us together, and that's what allowed us to be able to creatively create the project. It's fair to say that we were all in the corporate world, and now we're not. We're kind of doing our own thing. What do you think, Zsuzsanna, this says about us as individuals and about the corporate world?
I'd rather say that, I mean, it doesn't say anything about ourselves. I think, like Paul said, that I'm convinced, and I really truly deeply believe that people want to make a difference in their own way, and they're seeking environments in which this is possible. And so, I mean, funny enough, I mean, this week gave me a lot of that reflection as well, because I was in a startup environment, and then it's a startup with people of our age. Okay, so people who all left the corporate world as well. And they're recruiting data scientists, and data scientist is one of the most sought, sort of professions right now. They pay 1/3 of what a corporate would pay. And because of the environment, because of the innovative nature of the environment, because of the trust that they're building on this startup, they have no problem recruiting the biggest, highest, deepest talent in the world of data science. And at the same time, I'm working in the data world with a company, which we would say a corporate. And I find that it's the talent that stays in the corporate world is restricted more and more. And then they somehow lose touch of their own inner capability, or they don't dare anymore to innovate, or they became complacent to innovate. They more or less give up. So to me, there is a big, big danger if corporates cannot change for the better, cannot allow people to really embrace their capabilities to contribute in meaningful ways. Of course, they're going to end up in a talent zone. So when I started to work, or when we all started to work, I really entered into two corporates, I mean, Citibank and HP, both of which were amazingly sort of entrepreneurial, where I grew a lot. I was able to contribute in a meaningful way. And then I keep asking myself, what happened in the last 30 years? What happened in the last 10 years? I see amazing talent, and they are all outside of the corporate world.
Yeah, I think we also need to be a bit careful with when we use the word corporate world and that badge, because it's an emotive word and we can't really do anything about it. And when we granulate it down to actually people, right? As you mentioned, Paul said entrepreneurs, that there are people. If we look at the framework not as a corporate entity that cannot change, but more as people. And one of the things that you said, Zsuzsanna, when we were writing the book that I really love is nobody wakes up in the morning and comes to work expecting to have a bad day, expecting to screw things up. Yes. So on a really granular level, people want to make a difference. Absolutely. And I think if we kind of tap into that part of every person who wakes up in the morning and wants to come back with a feeling that they've made a difference, they've done something meaningful in that day, that's where we can start to maybe wake up that innovation and creativity.
And what I'm also seeing is that sort of that, I mean, I don't want to put any badge, but that very same corporate world given me everything that I have today. Yeah. The very same world can be really expansive or extremely limiting and restrictive.
Yeah.
They have the possibility to be a talent pool. They have the possibility to innovate. There is, and then over time, and I have yet to figure out why. I mean, I'm really intrigued by this after this week. After a while, it seems that that people will be more and more sort of driven by fear, and then that gets back to what Paul was saying, that once you have your inner strengths, and that's why I think our book is an amazing ability, because once you have your inner strength, even if you're restricted, you're no longer restricted, because what happens, and you have the inner strength to go through those challenges and then raise the bar for yourself, not because of extrinsic motivation, not because of accolades, not because of what you get rewarded for, but because you believe this is the thing to do. Yeah.
Very good.
And that is possible in all worlds, as I'm true to that statement, that nobody wakes up to screw up things. People wake up with fear, with stress, with questions about themselves. And they say, okay, will I survive if I do X, Y, Z? And I think that sort of leads to some of this.
Paul, you have a comment, Paul?
Well, I'm just going to turn the question over to you, Tony. We asked you the question in terms of what's been your main learning or insight from working with the group for the last three years, because again, you came from quite a different perspective as well. And I'll just be interested in your views.
Fantastic. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I often get asked this question, and for me, it was a great learning about myself, because I hadn't been in the corporate world for probably 30 years, and so working with other brilliant people. Well, let me rephrase that. Working with brilliant people. I'm not saying I'm brilliant, so working with brilliant minds like yourselves, and having ownership of ideas and having those ideas jostle for supremacy in terms of how we expressed ourselves. I found that process, if I'm honest, I found it fascinating and exhausting at the same time. And what fascinated me was how easy it was for you guys to dissect ideas and go over and over and over and over and over and fight for, advocate for what you believed in over hours and hours of discussion. And I remembered at some points just disconnecting and coming out and just watching this happen in real time, watching you guys have this conversation. And for me, that was probably one of my biggest learnings in if this happens, this is what happens in the corporate world, right? You have an idea, and how do you advocate for that idea when everyone else is also advocating for their ideas and pushing things through? And that whole process, it's a very slow process, which is why, my passion is emotionally intelligent negotiation, because I felt that we were negotiating almost every session. But what kept us together was we kept reminding ourselves why we'd come together for the project. And I think that was the crutch. That was the important thing. And if we take that into the corporate world, if we, have that shared value, have that the value addition that we're creating in the world, focus on that enables you to have those kind of discussions where you may disagree on some of the smaller bits, but you're still focused on the greater vision.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think one of the things I've learned from you over the years now, Tony, is you have this amazing ability to listen, calmly listen, and then absorb, and then create insights from that. I think, obviously, from my point of view, if I'm passionate about something, you tend to drive and you just go forward. Obviously, you listen at the same time, but you have this ability to step back and listen. And that was a catalyst for many great ideas that came out. And that's why we have some great insights in the communication chapter as well of the book, based on that observation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming towards the end, but I just wanted to bring Kevin in and ask, because you've actually jumped the gun for me there, Paul. I think Kevin is one of the best listeners I've met, and I wanted to ask you, Kevin, is this a skill set that you have developed, or is this a naturally occurring skill set, your ability to just listen?
Oh, I don't think it's natural at all. I think it's something that comes with practice and learning um, and a lot of failing. And, if you in a situation and a friend or a colleague or a stranger is trying to express something and you don't help them, I feel terrible after that if I haven't given them the space to speak. So, and I still find places in my life where I could do better, but in every day, in a meeting or in a situation, we're in a group and I'm sort of listening as part of my job. It comes from being the artist and always having something go in your ear and something going out of your hand. And it's an exercise I think anyone can do. It's like,
Absolutely.
the telephone doodler is not being distracted at all, but you're suspending your inner voice. You're letting it channel out of your hand instead of into your ears. And for me, it's like it just creates a pathway for things to come in and a channel for things to go out. But I think anyone who's sketched during a lecture or a call um, knows the value of some kind of creativity that it seems like it's on autopilot, but I think if you tried doing it with music as an experiment, you would discover that the conversation, the words, the tone, the rhythm, the feeling, and the spirit is what's guiding your hand, not some random gunk that my ninth grade teacher tried to tell me was coming out the hand. So it's a lifelong effort. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for the great question.
No, thank you, Kevin. So, this whole podcast is around empathy and emotional intelligence, and I think just to wrap up, one thing that we've discussed here in depth is that ability to be able to recognize in yourself some of those skill sets that are required for you to firstly become more in tune, more aware of yourself. And that's the key. And I think once you've been able to do that, then you become a much more engaged citizen of your communities, your teams, your companies. And in essence, that's why we wrote the book. There will be a link to the book in the bio. The book is called Enter Your Flow. It took 3 years to write, and we would be remiss to talk about the book without mentioning a fifth person. His name is John Zimmer. He couldn't be with us on the podcast today. But John was a corporate lawyer, and he's now an expert in improv and communications, and his contributions were fantastic to the book. And again, we'll put his link in the bio. I'd like to thank you, Paul. I'd like to thank you, Kevin. I'd like to thank you, Zsuzsanna, and I'd like to thank you, John, for an amazing journey and for joining me on this podcast today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.